Well, we want to hear it now from the president, who said that earlier today he is not happy with the immigration program that allowed the terrorist suspect to enter the country. Let's take a listen to the president from earlier.
I am today starting the process of terminating the diversity lottery program. I'm going to ask Congress to immediately initiate work to get rid of this program. Diversity lottery. Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good.
So just over 24 hours after the attack in New York, the discussion taking place here in South Florida, in Washington, and all over the country has to do with national security and immigration, the reality and the politics of it all. Joining us now from the campus of Nova Southeastern University is Professor Dustin Berna, who is an expert on ISIS, Islamic fundamentalism, and terrorism. And joining us from Washington is CBS 4's Mola Lenghi. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. And Mola, we have learned a little more about this suspect who is now facing federal terror charges. How did this suspect get into the country, and do we know if he was on anybody's radar?
Well, he got into the country legally. He came to the United States from Uzbekistan back in 2010 as a legal resident. In fact, he was one of more than 3,000 visa recipients from Uzbekistan that year alone. He obtained a green card through a program, as you guys have mentioned, the Diversity Visa Lottery Program. Now, this program, despite being passed with bipartisan support back in 1990, has really fallen out of favor among lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in recent years. Besides filling out the proper paperwork and being somewhat randomly selected, the only other requirements are a high school education, a medical exam. You also have to have no criminal record, some work experience, and then you have to pass the proper background screenings of all the other immigration programs that we have. But that's the process that this suspect went through to come to the States just 7 years ago. And this program, as I mentioned, is something that has landed in the crosshairs of lawmakers as well as the president, who as you just heard, is calling on Congress to scrap the program. Now, as far as whether this suspect was on the radar of anyone, he was known to the FBI. He was known to federal agents, but he was only known to the FBI because of his contact with other people who were being investigated for terrorist-related activity. So it was just by conversation, somewhat by proximity to other people who were being investigated, that he was on the radar of the FBI. But as we saw, not enough for them to actually pursue him.
Now, Dr. Berna, based on your experience, how did this man who got into the country legally, how did he become radicalized, and how many more others like him are out there?
We need to be very worried right now, because you think of the caliphate, think of it as a glass vase. It was all held together by this glass vase, and since the war has been going on, the glass vase is now shattered, and the caliphate is no longer in existence. And all those little shards of glass represent individuals from all over the world who went to the caliphate, Iraq and Syria, and joined it, and now they are going back to their home countries with all this hate and all this animosity. And so we have to be very concerned. And when it comes to Americans and Europeans, young people like this, they don't understand their faith. They don't understand their religion. They don't understand what it means. So what they do is they cling on to somebody, and usually it's these radical clerics that are giving them a false interpretation of what their faith actually is. In Christianity, think of it through a Christian perspective, that the goal of ISIS, from a Christian perspective, was to go back to the day after Jesus was crucified, and we're gonna turn our society back to that day, and then we're going to think of all the things that were legal at that time, slavery and lack of democracy and all of that, and that's ISIS's objective. And so these individuals, and then what we're going to implement is Leviticus, and think of how Leviticus is, and so it's a very radical interpretation of the Islamic faith with the objective of going back to the day Muhammad died.
Mola, I want to ask you, because the president today called our criminal justice system a joke. He said it's a laughingstock, and I'm just wondering, what has the reaction been to that in Washington, especially now that this suspect has been charged in the very system, the justice system, that the president was criticizing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a nuanced reaction. I classify it that way. There are some who just flat out disagree that the suspect should be prosecuted through the criminal justice system. They say there is a history of prosecuting people with terrorist connections and doing so fairly and justly and swiftly. But even the lawmakers who agree with the president that the suspect should not go through the civilian criminal justice system don't agree with the president that the system is a joke. In fact, a lot of them would argue the opposite, that it is the awe of the world. Instead, they're coming from the perspective of since 9/11, the United States has been engaged in a global war on terror. Yesterday, a terrorist allegedly committed a terrorist act on American soil, and so he should be treated as an enemy combatant, as someone within the reach of that global war on terror. So they're looking at it through that lens. They're saying he shouldn't be afforded the constitutional rights of American citizens and go through the criminal justice system. As an enemy combatant, as you know, he'd have no Miranda rights, no right to an attorney, no right to remain silent, none of the typical rights that are afforded to American citizens. Now, where this might get a little complicated is that this suspect had legal U.S. status. He had a green card. And so, in theory, by law, he is afforded the constitutional rights of an American citizen. So, perhaps I'd have to defer to the good professor there. I don't know if there's an instance where has been a precedent set where someone with legal status or an American citizen has been stripped of that status in order to be categorized as an enemy combatant. But there certainly are lawmakers who are calling for that.
Dr. Berna, we're short on time. I just want to ask you quickly, is there a way that we can prevent people from becoming radicalized?
The only way to prevent people from being radicalized is education, and they have to understand their faith and tolerance. What's happening in Europe, we don't want to become Europe. We see this huge amount of terrorism from Islamic extremism in Europe because these young Muslim people, young Muslim men in particular, feel alienated. They feel ostracized. They feel excluded from their society. And we don't want to go up that path, or we're going to end up like the Europeans, where we have a lot more homegrown radicalization, homegrown terrorism, and so we don't want that.
Pardon me for interrupting you, Dr. Berna from Nova Southeastern University in Molalenghi in Washington. Gentlemen, thanks to you both. And of course, we'll continue to provide the very latest developments in the terror attack in New York City. Our continuing coverage picks up later tonight on the CBS 4 News at 11.